As an ER nurse, I've seen countless patients on the brink of death, but there's one night I'll never forget. That night, an ambulance brought in an old woman who was barely alive. She had signed a DNR, do not resuscitate, order, so we could only make her as comfortable as possible. She had been abandoned by her family, and since the ER was full, we had no choice but to keep her on in her bed. With my years of experience, I could tell she was a goner. Her skin was cold and pale, her breathing was erratic, and the heart monitor showed wild fluctuations, like a crazy stock market. She was unresponsive to everything. We turned off the lights in her room, waiting for her heart rate to flatline. In other words, we were just waiting for her to die. About an hour later, something incredible happened. The old woman suddenly sat up, full of energy, straightened her clothes, and walked out of the room steadily. It was unbelievable. Everyone in the ER was stunned, speechless. One of the calmer nurses approached her to check her condition, but the old woman loudly said she was very hungry and wanted to eat. We scrambled to get a table and chairs, and brought a big plate of food from the hospital cafeteria. The old woman started eating voraciously, finishing almost a meal's worth of food in minutes. Afterward, she was chatting and laughing with the nurses, completely different from the frail, dying woman she had been an hour before. About half an hour later, she suddenly told the nurses she was very tired and wanted to sleep. We helped her back to bed, turned off the lights again, and about 30 minutes later, she passed away peacefully. This might not be a ghost story, but in my 21 years in the ER, this was by far the strangest thing I've ever experienced. How she went from the brink of death to lively and then passed away peacefully remains a mystery that I'll probably never understand.
One night shift, a terrified family member suddenly ran out of a patient's room and collapsed in front of the nurse's station, gasping for breath. "Miss, you need to come quick," she said, frantic. "What's going on?" I asked. "You have to see it for yourself." When we got to the room, the horrifying scene that greeted us is something I'll never forget. A frail old woman was clutching the bed rails with all her might, screaming her lungs out, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. And the bed she was sitting on was wildly shaking up and down like a bucking bronco, almost tossing her into the air. There was another patient and two nurses in the room, but they were all huddled in a corner, trembling with fear and clinging to each other, their eyes wide with terror. Later, we found out that the nurse in charge of assigning beds was new and didn't know the rules. That room had been blacklisted for a long time, and that particular bed was at the top of the list. Patients who had slept in that bed, and survived, all reported hearing the screams and laughter of children every night. I think that bed must be haunted by some evil spirits. A few months ago, we had this really troublesome old patient in my ward. He would press the call button every few minutes and then cause a huge fuss. We nurses had to take turns dealing with his constant calls and unreasonable demands. One day, the old man finally passed away. I was on the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift that night, and he died at around 8 p.m. I remember it so clearly. Even in death, he had this look on his face like, "How dare you let me die," as if we were to blame for his neglect of his own health. But dead is dead. His family came in around 9 p.m., and by 9:30, they had his body taken away by the funeral home. Every nurse felt a sigh of relief. But then, at exactly 10 p.m., the call button alarm went off at the nurse's station. None of us at the desk, including me, dared to move or speak because the system showed the call was coming from that old man's room. His room had been empty since he died, and no one had gone in. One quick-thinking nurse swiftly turned off the alarm, and we all pretended like nothing had happened. 5 minutes later, the alarm from his room went off again. This kept happening every 5 minutes for a full 4 hours. By 2 a.m., one of our more hot-tempered nurses, Mary, had had enough. She slammed the desk and shouted, "Enough," and stormed into the empty room. Mary flung the door open, took a deep breath, and yelled into the empty room, "Mr. X, you are dead. You have no right to bother us anymore. In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave this world and never come back." No joke, the call button never went off again after that. I work at a psychiatric hospital, and a few days ago, we admitted a really strange girl. I can't give too many details to protect her privacy. This girl is very young but has already tried to kill herself several times. It's unusual for someone so young to be in this situation. According to her family, she used to be a brilliant and talented artist. They showed me some of her work, which was all peaceful landscapes and portraits. But a few months ago, her art took a disturbing turn, filled with gruesome scenes of hangings, murders, and massacres. Her family is Native American, so her uncle decided to take her home and perform a traditional cleansing ritual called smudging. We usually don't oppose family members performing religious rituals for the patient, as long as a doctor, me, is present to ensure their safety. After the ritual, the girl didn't show any signs of improvement. In fact, things got worse. I remember clearly, when she came back to the hospital, she suddenly burst into a high-pitched, eerie laugh that sounded like it came straight from a demon. At the same moment, the TV next to her turned off by itself, and all the lights in the ward started flickering like crazy. To this day, the situation remains unresolved.